Palermo was beautiful in the way dangerous things often are. By day, sunlight spilled across ancient stone buildings, warming the narrow streets where laughter, music, and life seemed to flow effortlessly. Tourists wandered without knowing. Locals moved with quiet understanding. Everything felt alive. But at night, Palermo revealed its truth. The shadows grew longer. The air turned heavier. Conversations lowered into whispers. And behind the soft glow of golden streetlights, another world awakened, a world built not on laws, but on power. And in that world, one man stood above all. Ronin Veil. His name was not spoken loudly. Not because people feared punishment, but because it carried weight. The kind that settled into your chest and made you think twice before saying it again. He was not just powerful. He was absolute. Every deal, every territory, every silent agreement that kept Palermo's underworld balanced, somewhere, somehow, traced back to him. But power like that does not come without a cost. And Ronin had already paid more than most men ever could. 3 years ago, Ronin Veil was still human. Cold, yes. Calculated, always. But human. He had a son. Matteo. A boy with dark eyes that carried none of his father's darkness. A boy who laughed too easily, trusted too quickly, and somehow, against all logic, saw something good in a man the world feared. Ronin never deserved that kind of love. But he had it anyway. Until the night it was taken from him. It happened fast. Too fast. One mistake. One miscalculation. One enemy who decided to send a message, not to the king, but to his heart. By the time Ronin arrived, it was already over. And something inside him didn't break. It vanished. Completely. Since that night, Ronin Veil had become something else. He still ruled. Still commanded fear. Still made decisions that shaped lives and ended others. But he no longer felt them. No anger. No grief. No joy. Just silence. The kind that doesn't echo. The kind that swallows everything whole. People thought that made him stronger. They were wrong. Because a man who feels nothing has nothing left to lose. And that makes him far more dangerous than any monster. Every Thursday night, without exception, Ronin followed the same routine. Same restaurant. Same table. Same bottle of wine. No conversation. No variation. Just presence. Luca had stopped asking why a long time ago. If there was anyone who understood Ronin even slightly, it was him. Not because Ronin spoke, but because Luca had been there before everything changed. Before the silence. Before Matteo. Before the man in front of him became empty. You don't have to keep doing this, Luca said quietly one evening as they stepped out of the car. Ronin adjusted his cuff without looking at him. Yes, I do. Why? A pause. Not long. But long enough. Because I was here that night. Luca said nothing after that. There are questions you don't ask twice. The restaurant was exactly as it always was. Warm. Alive. Unaware. The kind of place where people still believed life was simple. Ronin stepped inside, and just like every other week, the atmosphere shifted. Not dramatically. Not openly. But enough. Conversations softened. Eyes turned, then quickly looked away. Even the staff moved with more caution. Because everyone knew. Men like Ronin Veil didn't exist in the same world as everyone else. They only visited it. Elena Hart had no idea who he was. She had only been in Palermo for a little over 3 weeks. Long enough to learn the streets near her apartment. Long enough to understand basic Italian. Long enough to realize that starting over wasn't as easy as she had hoped. But she was trying. That counted for something. Waitressing wasn't glamorous. It wasn't permanent. But it paid enough to keep her moving forward, and more importantly, it kept her busy. Because staying still meant thinking. And thinking meant remembering. And remembering was something she wasn't ready to do yet. Elena, her manager whispered urgently, stepping close enough that only she could hear. Table in the corner. Be careful. She followed his gaze. And saw him. Even without context, she felt it. That presence. Still. Controlled. Heavy in a way that didn't need explanation. She frowned slightly. What's wrong with him? Her manager hesitated. Then said quietly, nothing, if you don't make a mistake. Elena blinked. That's comforting. It's not a joke. She studied him for a second longer. Then exhaled. Relax. It's just a table. But what she didn't know was that table had never been just a table. Ronin sat down without a word. He didn't need menus. Didn't need recommendations. Everything here was already decided before he even walked in. Routine. Control. Predictability. The only things he still allowed himself. Until something disrupted it. Elena, right? The voice was new. Unfamiliar. Ronin didn't look up immediately. He noticed things in fragments, the way the glass was placed in front of him, the slight shift in air as someone stood too close, the absence of hesitation. Then he looked. And for a brief moment, something flickered. She wasn't like the others. No fear in her posture. No tension in her hands. No rehearsed politeness. Just normal. I'm new, Elena continued casually. So if I mess something up, I apologize in advance. Ronin watched her. Not with interest. Not yet. But with awareness. And then it happened. A small misstep. A shift of balance. A tray that tilted just enough. And suddenly, red wine spilled across his suit. Dark. Sharp. Spreading quickly across fabric that probably cost more than Elena had earned in the past 6 months. The room went silent. Instantly. Completely. Because everyone understood what that meant. Mistakes like this didn't end well. Elena froze. Not out of fear. But because she knew. That was bad. Okay, she said slowly, staring at the damage. That could have gone better. No panic. No pleading. No immediate apology storm. Just honesty. Ronin looked down at the stain. Then back at her. And something strange happened. He didn't feel anger. He didn't feel anything at all. But for the first time in a long time, he noticed the absence. You spilled wine on me, he said calmly. Yes. Elena met his gaze without flinching. That appears to be the situation. A ripple of tension moved through the restaurant. Somebody near the bar stopped breathing. Luca, standing by the entrance, had already begun walking forward. Slow. Controlled. Ready. Because this was where things turned. Where consequences happened. Where Ronin reminded everyone exactly who he was. But Ronin didn't move. Didn't react. Didn't punish. He just looked at her. You're not afraid, he said. Elena tilted her head slightly. Should I be? That question hung in the air longer than it should have. Because it wasn't just curiosity. It was defiance. Unintentional. But real. And for the first time in 3 years. Something cracked. Not visibly. Not completely. But enough. Because instead of ending the moment, Ronin leaned back slightly. Studying her like a problem he couldn't solve. Most people are, he said. He chose not to end the moment. He chose to stay in it. And what he didn't know was, this wasn't just a conversation. This was the beginning of something far more dangerous than any enemy he had ever faced. Because bullets, betrayal, and power. He understood those. But this quiet, steady, unexpected presence sitting across from him. This woman who refused to be afraid. This feeling he couldn't name. Would be the one thing capable of destroying him. Or saving him. And neither of them were ready for what came next. The first rule of survival in Palermo's underworld was simple. Nothing unusual ever happened by accident. And yet, that Thursday night refused to fit into any rule Ronin Veil had ever lived by. He didn't dismiss her. He didn't threaten her. He didn't walk away. Instead, he sat there, with a stain on his suit and a stranger across from him, and allowed something unfamiliar to exist in his world. Conversation. Not the kind built on negotiation. Not the kind layered with hidden meaning. Just words. Unfiltered. Unnecessary. Alive. You're going to get in trouble for this, Elena said after a moment, glancing toward her manager who looked seconds away from collapsing. For what? Ronin asked. For kidnapping your waitress. A faint pause. Then, quietly. I don't kidnap people. Elena raised an eyebrow. That sounded like a very specific denial. Ronin didn't respond. But the corner of his mouth shifted slightly. Again. That almost smile. And just like that, the tension in the room, while still present, began to change. Not disappear. But bend. Because no one had ever seen Ronin Veil like this. Luca, however, wasn't reassured. He watched from a distance, arms crossed, eyes sharp. This wasn't harmless. This wasn't nothing. This was deviation. And deviation led to weakness. He stepped closer, just enough for Ronin to notice. You're done here, Luca said calmly, though the message beneath it was anything but. Ronin didn't look at him. No. One word. Flat. Final. Luca's jaw tightened slightly. This isn't. I said no. Silence. Heavy. Unmovable. Elena glanced between them, sensing something deeper than a simple disagreement. Should I be leaving? She asked. Ronin's eyes returned to her instantly. No. Simple again. Certain. And that certainty did something strange to Elena. It didn't trap her. It didn't scare her. It grounded her. Like for the first time since arriving in Palermo. She wasn't drifting. That night stretched longer than it should have. Minutes turned into an hour. Then another. The restaurant slowly returned to life around them, though quieter, more cautious. But at that table, time moved differently. So, Elena said, resting her chin lightly on her hand, you always sit here and say nothing? Yes. That sounds incredibly boring. It isn't. Because? Ronin held her gaze. Because no one interrupts it. Elena smiled faintly. Well, that's no longer true. No. It wasn't. And for reasons he couldn't explain. Ronin didn't want it to be. By the time the night ended, something had shifted. Not dramatically. Not visibly. But enough that when Ronin stood to leave, he paused. A fraction longer than usual. You work next Thursday? He asked. Elena blinked. That depends. Are you planning to wear something expensive again? A beat. Then. Yes. She nodded thoughtfully. Then I'll be here. And just like that, a new routine was born. The following week, Ronin arrived earlier. Not out of habit. But anticipation. He didn't acknowledge it. Didn't question it. But Luca noticed. "You're early," Luca said, watching him take his seat. "Yes. You're never early." Ronin didn't respond. Because there was no answer he was willing to give. Elena noticed too. "You're early," she said as she approached, placing a glass of water in front of him. "So I've been told." She tilted her head. "Planning to spill something before I get the chance?" "No." "Disappointing." A pause. Then. "You didn't run," Ronin said. Elena frowned slightly. "From what?" "Most people would have. Most people don't get invited back after committing fabric crimes." Another almost smile. There it was again. Faint. But real. The Thursdays became something else. Not routine. Not obligation. But something both of them began to expect. To rely on. To look forward to, though neither would admit it. They talked more. Longer. Deeper. At first, it was simple things. Food. The city. The difference between American coffee and Italian espresso. But slowly. Carefully. The conversations began to change. "Why Palermo?" Ronin asked one night. Elena paused mid-motion, her expression shifting just slightly. "Why not?" "That's not an answer." She looked at him for a moment. Then sighed softly, setting the tray down. "Because it's far enough," she said. "From what?" Another pause. This one heavier. "From things I didn't want to take with me." Ronin didn't press. But he understood. More than she realized. "Running doesn't erase anything," he said quietly. Elena met his gaze. "No," she admitted. "But it gives you space to breathe." A simple sentence. But it lingered. Because for 3 years. Ronin Veil had forgotten what that felt like. And then. One night. Everything changed again. "Do you ever leave this place?" Elena asked suddenly. Ronin glanced up. "Yes." "For something that isn't business?" A pause. "No." She smiled slightly. "That's sad." "It's efficient. It's lonely." That word hung between them. Unwelcome. Unavoidable. Ronin's expression didn't change. But something beneath it did. "You assume too much," he said. Elena shook her head. "I recognize it." Silence. Not empty. But full of something neither of them could quite define. "I like the ocean," Elena said softly after a moment. Ronin watched her. "Why?" "Because it doesn't care who you are," she replied. "It doesn't care what you've done. It just exists." Ronin leaned back slightly. Considering. "The ocean forgets nothing," he said. "It just hides it better." Elena smiled faintly. "Then maybe it's perfect for people like us." People like us. The words settled deeper than they should have. Because what she didn't know was. She had just placed herself in his world. Without realizing it. "Show me." The words came without warning. Without calculation. Without permission. Elena blinked. "Show you what?" "The ocean." A beat. "You're serious?" "Yes." She studied him carefully. Searching for the hidden meaning. The catch. The danger. But all she found was something unfamiliar in him. Not control. Not dominance. Something quieter. Something human. "All right," she said slowly. "But I have one condition." Ronin's gaze sharpened slightly. "Say it." "No bodyguards." Across the room, Luca went still. "Absolutely not." But Ronin didn't hesitate. "Done." "Ronin," Luca stepped forward immediately. "Done," Ronin repeated. Final. Not because it was reckless, Ronin had taken risks before. But because this was different. This wasn't strategy. This wasn't control. This was personal. And personal was dangerous. Especially for a man who had built his entire empire on never letting anything be personal again. "You're really doing this," Elena said as they stepped onto the quiet street, her voice lighter than the tension lingering beneath it. "Yes." No backup, no bodyguards, no one watching from rooftops. Ronin glanced at her. "No." She studied him carefully. "And you're okay with that?" A brief pause. "Yes." It was the truth. And that alone should have been alarming. The city shifted around them as they walked. The further they moved from the restaurant, the quieter Palermo became. The noise of people and music faded, replaced by the distant rhythm of waves crashing against stone. The air changed too, cooler, touched with salt, carrying something vast and open. Elena breathed it in slowly. "I missed this," she said. Ronin didn't respond immediately. Because he hadn't realized something until that moment. He had missed it too. Not the ocean. Not the air. But the feeling of moving without purpose. Without calculation. Without knowing exactly what would happen next. They reached the shoreline just as the city lights began to blur into the darkness behind them. The ocean stretched endlessly in front of them, black, alive, shifting under the pale glow of the moon. Elena stepped closer to the water without hesitation, slipping off her shoes and letting the cool waves brush against her feet. Ronin stayed where he was. Watching. Always watching. "You're not coming closer," she called over her shoulder. "I can see it from here." "That's not the same." He didn't answer. So she turned, walking back toward him until she stood just a step away. "You spend your whole life controlling everything," she said quietly. "But some things, you just have to feel." A simple statement. But it landed deeper than she intended. Because what she didn't know was. Ronin had spent 3 years avoiding exactly that. Slowly, almost reluctantly, he stepped forward. One step. Then another. Until the edge of the water reached him. Cold. Sharp. Real. It spread through him instantly, not painful, not overwhelming, but undeniable. For the first time in a long time. He felt something. Not emotion. Not yet. But sensation. And that was enough. Elena. Her name left his lips differently this time. Quieter. Less controlled. She turned to him. "Yes?" A pause. Longer than usual. Because Ronin Veil, man who commanded armies, who made decisions without hesitation, who never second-guessed himself, didn't know what to say. And that was new. "I don't do this," he said finally. "Do what?" "This." Elena smiled softly. "Then maybe it's time you start." The waves continued their rhythm, brushing against the shore like a heartbeat that refused to stop. For a while, neither of them spoke. They just stood there. Two people from completely different worlds, sharing the same silence. But it wasn't empty. It was calm. "Why did you really come to Palermo?" Ronin's voice cut through the quiet. Not sharp. Not demanding. But direct. Elena didn't answer right away. She looked out at the horizon instead, her expression softening into something distant. "I told you," she said quietly. "To get away." "That's not the whole truth." She let out a small breath. "No, it's not." The air shifted. Subtle. But heavier. "Someone was looking for me," she continued. "Someone I couldn't outrun, unless I disappeared completely." Ronin's gaze sharpened slightly. "Who?" Elena shook her head. "It doesn't matter anymore." "It does if they're still a threat." "They're not." Too fast. Too certain. Ronin noticed. Of course he did. But he didn't push. Not yet. Because what he understood, perhaps better than anyone, was that some truths were harder to speak than others. And you? Elena asked, turning the question back to him. Why here every Thursday? Ronin didn't look at her. His gaze remained fixed on the water. Because I was here once, he said. With someone? A pause. Then. Yes. She didn't need to ask who. The weight in his voice said enough. What happened? She asked gently. Silence. Longer this time. The kind that stretched until it almost broke. But then. I lost him. Simple. Quiet. Final. Elena's expression softened. I'm sorry. Ronin didn't react. Not outwardly. But inside. Something shifted. Because those words, so common, so often meaningless, felt different coming from her. Not empty. Not expected. Real. He liked the ocean, Ronin continued, his voice lower now. Said it made everything feel smaller. Elena smiled faintly. He was right. Yes. Another pause. Then. I didn't come back after that, Ronin said. Until now. Elena looked at him. Why now? He turned his head slightly, meeting her gaze. And for a moment. There was no distance between them. No power. No fear. No walls. Just two people, standing in something neither of them fully understood. Because you asked me to. The truth. Unfiltered. Unexpected. And dangerous. Elena felt it. That shift. That moment where something crossed from curiosity into something deeper. Something neither of them had planned. And maybe. Something neither of them could stop. The wind picked up slightly, brushing strands of her hair across her face. Without thinking, Ronin reached out. His fingers hovered for a fraction of a second. Then gently moved the strand away. The contact was brief. Barely there. But it was enough. Because that was the moment everything changed. Not dramatically. Not loudly. But permanently. Elena didn't pull away. Didn't step back. She just looked at him. And for the first time. There was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Not curiosity. Not defiance. Something softer. Something that made Ronin's chest tighten in a way he couldn't explain. You should be careful, he said suddenly. Elena blinked. About what? About me. A quiet warning. Not a threat. A truth. She studied him for a moment. Then smiled slightly. I think you're the one who should be careful. Ronin frowned faintly. Why? Elena took a step back, letting the water pull away from her feet. Because you're starting to feel something, she said. And I don't think you know what to do with that. A direct hit. Accurate. Dangerously so. Ronin didn't answer. Because he couldn't. Because she was right. And that was something he hadn't allowed anyone to be in a very long time. They left the shore later than they should have. The city was quieter now. Darker. Watching. And as they walked back toward the lights of Palermo, neither of them spoke. Not because there was nothing to say. But because too much had already been said. Without words. From the shadows across the street, a figure watched them return. Silent. Patient. Interested. A phone lifted briefly. A photo taken. And then. Gone. Because what Ronin didn't know was. The moment he stepped into the light with her. He had already made her visible. And in his world. Being seen. Was the beginning of being hunted. And that night. As Elena closed the door to her apartment, leaning back again, not openly. Not aggressively. But enough that I don't like it. Ronin's expression didn't shift. They've always watched. Yes, Luca said. But they've never waited. That was the difference. Observation was normal. Patience was strategy. Ronin leaned back slightly, his gaze turning distant for just a moment. Then. They're looking for something. Yes. And they haven't found it. Luca hesitated. Just slightly. They're getting closer. A silence followed. Not empty. Measured. Because both men understood what that meant. In their world, enemies didn't move unless they believed they had an advantage. And advantages came from weaknesses. You think I've given them one, Ronin said. It wasn't a question. Luca met his gaze directly. I think you're about to. Across the city, Elena Hart was trying very hard not to think about him. Which, unfortunately, meant she couldn't stop. The ocean had done something she hadn't expected. It hadn't just shown her a different side of Ronin. It had shown her something in herself. Something she had been avoiding just as carefully. Connection. And that was dangerous. You're distracted. Elena looked up sharply, nearly dropping the tray in her hands. I'm working, she replied quickly. Her coworker raised an eyebrow. You've been wiping the same table for 5 minutes. Elena glanced down. He wasn't wrong. She exhaled softly, setting the cloth aside. I'm just tired. A beat. Does this have anything to do with the man who makes everyone in this restaurant forget how to breathe? Elena paused. Then shook her head. No. A lie. A very obvious one. But what she didn't say was. She wasn't afraid of Ronin Veil. She was afraid of what being around him was starting to mean. That Thursday, the air felt different. Heavier. Quieter. Like the city itself was holding its breath. Ronin arrived on time. Not early. Not late. But precise. Controlled. Back in place. At least on the surface. Elena saw him the moment he walked in. And for the first time. She hesitated. Not because of him. But because of everything that had changed since the last time they stood together. The ocean. The silence. The way he had said her name. She forced herself to move anyway. Because stopping now would only make it worse. You're back to being on time, she said as she approached the table. Ronin looked at her. Yes. No more early arrivals? A pause. Would you prefer that? Elena smiled faintly. I'm just observing. Something flickered in his expression. Familiar now. Small. But real. But tonight wasn't like the others. Because tonight. Ronin wasn't alone. Elena noticed him immediately. A man seated a few tables away. Not part of the usual crowd. Not local. Watching. Not openly. But enough. Her instincts tightened. Friend of yours? She asked casually, placing the glass down. Ronin didn't turn his head. Didn't need to. No. Because he's been looking over here for the past 10 minutes. That got Luca's attention immediately. From across the room, his posture shifted, subtle, but ready. Ronin finally glanced toward the man. Just once. Brief. Measured. And that was enough. Because in that single look, something passed between them. Recognition. Not of a face. But of intent. Leave it, Ronin said quietly. Elena frowned slightly. Leave, the guy who's watching you? Yes. That feels like a bad decision. It isn't. She studied him for a moment. Then leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. You don't look like a man who ignores problems. I'm not. Then why? Because this isn't the problem. A quiet answer. But it carried weight. Because what he didn't say was. The real problem was sitting across from him. Elena leaned back slowly. Confusion mixed with something else. Something she didn't want to name. That night, their conversation didn't flow the same way. There were pauses now. Spaces filled with things unsaid. And beneath it all, tension. Not between them, but around them. You were right, Ronin said suddenly. Elena blinked. That's rare. About what? The ocean. She smiled slightly. Careful. That almost sounded like a compliment. It was. A beat. Then. It reminded me of something. Her expression softened. What? Ronin didn't answer immediately. Because the truth wasn't simple. That I'm not as in control as I thought. The honesty of it surprised even him. And it hit Elena harder than she expected. Because men like Ronin didn't admit things like that. They didn't acknowledge cracks. They didn't show edges. And yet, here he was. That's not a bad thing, she said quietly. It is in my world. Maybe your world is the problem. A dangerous statement. In any other context. With any other person. It would have ended badly. But Ronin didn't react. Not with anger. Not with dismissal. Just thought. From across the room, the man watching them stood up. Slowly. Deliberately. And walked toward the exit. Luca's eyes followed him the entire way. Tension tightening with every step. Because this wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. This was confirmation. They know, Luca said quietly as he approached Ronin's table. Ronin didn't look at him. Yes. Elena glanced between them. Know what? A pause. Too long. Too heavy. Because this was the moment where two worlds began to collide. Ronin stood. Go home tonight, he said to Elena. Her brow furrowed. I do that every night. Not tonight. His tone had changed. Sharpened. Controlled in a different way. Not distant. Protective. And that scared her more than anything else. Ronin. Go, he said, quieter now. And don't take your usual route. The words landed hard. Because suddenly, this wasn't just conversation anymore. This was real. Elena held his gaze. Searching. Demanding. Tell me what's going on. A beat. Then. They're looking for a way to reach me. And? His eyes darkened slightly. And they may have just found one. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Elena stepped back slowly. Understanding dawning in pieces she didn't want to put together. You think that's me? Ronin didn't answer. He didn't need to. For the first time since meeting him. Elena felt it. Not fear of him. But fear of what being connected to him meant. Then maybe I should stop sitting at this table, she said quietly. The words cut deeper than she intended. Because something in Ronin's expression shifted. Sharply. No, he said immediately. Too fast. Too certain. Too real. And that was when it became undeniable. This wasn't just curiosity anymore. This wasn't just conversation. This was something neither of them could walk away from easily. But what they didn't know was, it was already too late. Because somewhere in the dark corners of Palermo, plans were already in motion. And the moment Ronin Veil chose not to let her walk away, he sealed both their fates. Because in his world, love wasn't just dangerous. It was a target. And Elena Hart. Unavoidable. Across the city, Elena walked faster than usual. Not running. Not panicking. But aware. Too aware. The feeling followed her like a shadow she couldn't shake. That sense that something had changed. And there was no going back to what things were before. She turned down a different street than usual. Then another. Then another. Trying to convince herself that she was being cautious. Not scared. But what she didn't want to admit was, she had seen it in Ronin's eyes. That shift. That warning. And men like him didn't warn people unless it mattered. When she finally reached her apartment, she locked the door immediately. Then checked it again. And again. Only when she was sure. Completely sure. Did she lean back against it and exhale. Slow. Unsteady. This is stupid, she muttered to herself. But the words didn't feel true. Because deep down, she knew. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Ronin didn't sleep that night. He stood by the window of his office, the city stretching out beneath him like a map of everything he controlled. Everything he owned. Everything he had built. And for the first time, none of it felt enough. She's a liability. Luca's voice broke the silence behind him. Ronin didn't turn. I know. Then we remove the risk. The words were cold. Practical. The kind of solution that had kept them alive for years. But Ronin's response came instantly. No. Luca exhaled sharply. You're not thinking clearly. No, Ronin said quietly. I am. He turned then. Slowly. Deliberately. And for the first time in years. There was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Not emptiness. Not detachment. Something else. Something alive. She's not part of this, Ronin continued. She is now. She doesn't have to be. That's not how this works. Luca held his gaze. Unflinching. Because someone had to. Because someone had to say the things Ronin refused to admit. You're choosing her, Luca said. A statement. Not a question. Ronin didn't hesitate. Yes. The word landed like a gunshot in a silent room. Because that changed everything. Luca looked at him for a long moment. Then nodded once. Slowly. Then we protect her. Not approval. Not agreement. But loyalty. Because no matter how dangerous this path was, Luca would walk it. Right beside him. Morning came too quickly. And with it, consequences. Elena barely slept. Every sound felt louder. Every shadow darker. Every passing car slower than it should have been. And when morning finally arrived, it didn't bring relief. Only clarity. She couldn't ignore this. Couldn't pretend it was nothing. Couldn't go back to before. So she made a decision. One she wasn't sure she was ready for. But one she knew she had to make. That evening, she didn't wait for Thursday. She went to him. The building alone told her everything she needed to know. Tall. Imposing. Guarded in ways that weren't obvious, but unmistakable. This wasn't a place people walked into. It was a place they were allowed into. And yet, she stepped forward anyway. The guards stopped her immediately. Name. Elena Hart. A pause. A glance exchanged. Then one of them spoke into a device quietly. Seconds later, the tension shifted. Go in. She didn't expect that. Didn't expect how easily the doors opened. Didn't expect how quickly she was led inside. But what she didn't know was, Ronin had already given the order. the moment her name was spoken. When she entered his office, he was already there. Waiting. You shouldn't be here, he said. His voice was calm. But not distant. Not anymore. Elena crossed her arms slightly. And you shouldn't send someone away without explaining why their life might be in danger. A fair point. A dangerous one. Ronin stepped closer. Did anyone follow you? I don't know. That was enough. His expression hardened slightly. Not at her. At the situation. At the risk. At himself. You need to stay here, he said. Elena blinked. Stay here? Yes. For how long? As long as it takes. Silence. Then. No. The word came out immediately. Firm. Certain. Ronin's gaze sharpened. No. I'm not hiding in your world because someone out there might be watching me, she said. That's not living. It's surviving. I didn't come here just to survive. The words hit harder than she expected. Because they weren't just about him. They were about her. Her past. Her running. Her fear. Ronin studied her. Carefully. Because what she didn't realize was. She wasn't just refusing safety. She was challenging him. Challenging everything he believed kept people alive. They will use you to get to me, he said quietly. Then maybe you should stop letting them think I matter that much. I can't. A beat. Why not? And there it was. The question neither of them had wanted to ask. Ronin didn't look away. Didn't hesitate. Didn't hide. Because you do. Silence fell between them. Heavy. Unavoidable. Real. Elena felt it. That shift. That line. Crossed without warning. Without permission. Without a way back. Because this wasn't just danger anymore. This wasn't just coincidence. This wasn't just connection. This was something else. Something deeper. Something that changed the rules completely. And what neither of them knew yet. Was that somewhere, not far from that building. A phone rang. A voice answered. And a single sentence was spoken. We have confirmation. Because the moment Ronin Veil chose her. The war truly began. The first mistake wasn't falling in love. It was being noticed. Because in a world built on shadows, the moment something stepped into the light, it became a target. And Elena Hart had just become the brightest one in Palermo. Ronin didn't let her leave. Not that night. Not after what he now knew. You're staying, he said, his tone no longer a suggestion. Elena stood in the middle of his office, arms crossed, chin slightly raised. You don't get to decide that. I do if it keeps you alive. I didn't ask you to protect me. No, Ronin replied quietly. But I'm doing it anyway. Silence fell between them. Sharp. Unresolved. Because what Elena didn't understand yet was. Protection, in Ronin's world, was not gentle. It was absolute. You can't lock me in here, she said. Ronin took a step closer. I'm not locking you in. Then what would you call this? A delay, he answered. Until I remove the threat. And how long does that take? A pause. Too long. Elena's expression shifted. That's what I thought. She turned, moving toward the door. Ronin caught her wrist before she could reach it. Not rough. But firm. Unyielding. Elena. She stopped. Not because he held her. But because of the way he said her name. You don't understand what's coming, he said, his voice low. Then explain it to me. A fair demand. One he couldn't avoid anymore. They won't come for you immediately, Ronin said. They'll wait. Watch. Learn your patterns. Find the moment where you're most vulnerable. Tonight, she agreed. That was all he needed. For now. Across the city, plans were already moving. They've confirmed it. The voice on the other end of the line was calm. Satisfied. She's close to him. Not just physically. A pause. Then. Good. Santoro leaned back slowly, a faint smile touching his lips. For months, he had been watching. Waiting. Studying Ronin Veil from a distance, searching for something no one else had ever found. A weakness. And now. He had it. Prepare the team, Santoro said. How soon? Not yet. Patience. Always patience. Let him feel safe first. Back in Ronin's world, safety was an illusion carefully constructed. And tonight. It was fragile. Elena didn't expect the silence. Ronin's home, if it could even be called that, was nothing like she imagined. No chaos. No noise. No visible signs of the life he lived outside these walls. Just space. Clean. Controlled. Quiet. Too quiet. You don't live here, she said. Ronin glanced at her. I do. No, she shook her head slightly. You exist here. A subtle difference. But an important one. Ronin didn't respond. Because she wasn't wrong. A glass of water sat untouched on the table between them. Minutes passed. Then more. Until. Why me? Elena asked suddenly. Ronin looked up. What? Why does this matter so much to you? A dangerous question. Because it demanded something he wasn't used to giving. Honesty. You could walk away, she continued. Cut this off. Make me disappear from your world completely. I won't. Why? There it was again. That line. That truth waiting to be spoken. Ronin stood slowly. Walked closer. Stopped just a step away from her. Because losing one person, he said quietly, was enough. Elena's breath caught slightly. Not because of the words. But because of how he said them. This isn't the same, she whispered. No, Ronin agreed. It isn't. A beat. That's why I won't let it happen again. Silence wrapped around them. But it wasn't empty anymore. It was full. Of everything neither of them had said out loud yet. Elena looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time. She understood something she hadn't before. He wasn't trying to control her. He was trying to protect the only thing that made him feel alive again. And that realization terrified her. Because what she didn't know was, the closer she got to him, the more dangerous her world became. Outside, the city moved as it always did. Unaware. Unchanged. But beneath it, something had already begun. A car slowed near the building. Engine quiet. Lights dim. Watching. Waiting. Inside, Elena finally allowed herself to sit. To breathe. To exist in a moment that felt both safe and impossibly fragile. You can't protect me forever, she said softly. Ronin's gaze didn't waver. I don't need forever. A pause. Just long enough. And that was the truth. Because in his world, time wasn't something you were given. It was something you fought for. But what Ronin didn't know was that time was already running out. Because somewhere in the darkness, the first move had already been made. And the next one would change everything. Morning came quietly. Too quietly. The kind of quiet that didn't soothe, it warned. Elena woke before the sun fully rose. For a moment, she didn't move. Didn't open her eyes. Just listened. Silence. No city noise. No distant voices. Just the faint hum of a place that didn't quite feel like home. Then it hit her. She wasn't in her apartment. She was in his world. Her eyes opened slowly. The ceiling above her was unfamiliar. Clean lines, cold design, no warmth, no personality. Like everything else in Ronin Veil's life. Controlled. Contained. Empty. She sat up, exhaling quietly. For a second, she almost forgot why she was here. Almost. Until it all came back. The warning. The watching man. The tension in Ronin's voice. You're awake. His voice came from the doorway. Calm. Steady. But no longer distant. Elena turned slightly. Ronin stood there, already dressed, already composed, like he hadn't slept at all. Maybe he hadn't. You always wake up like a ghost? She asked. A faint flicker in his expression. You're still here. I told you I would be. A pause. Then. For tonight. He stepped into the room. Eat something, he said. Then we talk. Elena raised an eyebrow. That sounds serious. It is. Breakfast was quiet. Not uncomfortable. But heavy with things that hadn't been decided yet. I can't stay here, Elena said finally, breaking the silence. Ronin didn't look surprised. I know. You said we'd figure something out. We will. How? A pause. Measured. Then. You don't go back to your apartment. Elena frowned. That's not figuring something out. That's just extending this. It's the safest option. It's not a life. Ronin leaned back slightly. Watching her. Weighing every word. You want to live, he said. Yes. Including the risk that comes with it. Yes. And you're willing to accept what that risk means. Elena hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. Ronin saw it. Of course he did. You don't know what it means, he said quietly. Then stop talking in warnings and tell me. Silence. Then. They will hurt you to get to me. The words landed clean. Sharp. Unavoidable. Elena held his gaze. I've been hurt before. That's not the same. No, she said. It's not. A beat. But I survived. Ronin's expression darkened slightly. And if this time you don't? The question wasn't harsh. It wasn't cruel. It was real. Elena didn't answer. Because she didn't have one. And for a moment. That silence said everything. Stay today, Ronin said finally. Just today. A compromise. Again. Elena exhaled slowly. Fine. That was the agreement. Temporary. Fragile. But enough. Or at least. It should have been. By midday, the tension had shifted. Not gone. But quieter. Like the calm before something inevitable. Elena couldn't sit still. She moved around the space, exploring carefully, not out of curiosity, but restlessness. You don't even have pictures, she said, glancing at the walls. Ronin stood by the window again. I don't need reminders. Or you don't want them. A pause. He didn't answer. She stepped closer. There was someone, she said softly. Not a question. Ronin's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Yes. Your son. The word lingered. Heavy. Personal. Ronin turned slowly. You don't have to talk about it, Elena added. Another pause. Longer. Then. He was 10. Her breath caught slightly. He liked the ocean, Ronin continued. Said it made him feel like the world was big. A hand grabbed her arm. Rough. Unforgiving. She fought. Instinctively. Desperately. Let me go. But what she didn't know was, this wasn't about strength. This was about strategy. A sharp pressure against her neck. Then. Darkness. Downstairs. Ronin dropped the last man in front of him. Breathing steady. Controlled. Too easy. That was the problem. His instinct screamed. Wrong. Elena. He moved instantly. Fast. Faster than before. Up the stairs. 2 at a time. Gun raised. Ready. The door. Open. Empty. Silence. For a moment. Nothing. Then. Everything. The shift. The realization. The truth. They hadn't come to kill. They had come to take. And they had succeeded. Ronin stood in the middle of the room. Completely still. Then slowly. His hand tightened around the gun. Not rage. Not yet. Something far worse. Clarity. Because now. There was no confusion. No hesitation. No choice. This wasn't about power anymore. This wasn't about control. This was personal. And what Santoro didn't understand, what no one understood, was that Ronin Veil without emotion was dangerous. But Ronin Veil with something to lose was unstoppable. He turned slowly. Eyes colder than they had ever been. They took her. Luca's voice came from behind him. Tight. Focused. Ready. Ronin didn't look at him. I know. A pause. Then. What do we do? Silence. 1 breath. 2. Then Ronin spoke. We end this. And that was the moment the war truly began. Pain didn't come back all at once. For Ronin Veil, it returned in pieces. Sharp. Controlled. Focused. Not the kind that broke a man. The kind that rebuilt him into something far more dangerous. The room still smelled like gunpowder. Like failure. Like the exact moment everything slipped out of his control. Ronin stood in the center of it, unmoving, eyes fixed on the empty space where Elena had been taken. No shouting. No destruction. No visible rage. Just silence. Luca watched him carefully. Because he had seen this before. Not exactly like this. But close enough. The last time Ronin had stood this still, this quiet. Something had died. This was planned, Luca said, breaking the silence. Ronin didn't answer. He knew you'd be here. Knew she'd be here. Knew how you'd react. Still nothing. Luca stepped closer. We need to move fast. A pause. Then. No. The word was quiet. But absolute. Luca frowned. No. We move smart. And there it was. The shift. Subtle. But unmistakable. Ronin turned slowly. And in his eyes. There was no emptiness anymore. No detachment. No numbness. There was purpose. They didn't just take her, Ronin said. They made sure I knew they could. A message. A challenge. A mistake. Luca exhaled slowly. You think this is Santoro? I know it is. Of course it was. No one else would wait this long. No one else would play this carefully. No one else would dare. They'll expect a reaction, Luca said. Yes. They'll prepare for it. Yes. A beat. Then what's the plan? Ronin didn't answer immediately. Because this wasn't just another move on a board. This wasn't territory. This wasn't power. This was Elena. They want leverage, Ronin said finally. They won't kill her. Not yet. Luca nodded once. Agreed. They'll contact us. They will. Another pause. Then. And when they do. Ronin's voice dropped. Lower. Colder. More dangerous than anything Luca had heard in years. We let them think they're in control. Across the city. Elena woke up slowly. At first, there was nothing. No sound. No movement. Just darkness. Then. Pain. A dull pressure at the back of her head. A reminder. Her eyes opened. Slowly. Carefully. The room was unfamiliar. Cold. Industrial. The faint smell of salt and rust hung in the air. A warehouse. Near the water. Her hands were tied. Not tightly. But enough. She didn't panic. Not immediately. Because panic meant losing control. And control was the only thing she had left. Good. You're awake. The voice came from the corner. Calm. Almost casual. Elena turned her head slightly. A man stepped forward. Well-dressed. Composed. Smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. Where am I? She asked. Direct. Steady. The man chuckled softly. Somewhere safe. A lie. A very obvious one. Elena Hart, he continued, studying her. I was expecting someone different. She held his gaze. And I was expecting someone less cliché. A beat. Then. He laughed. Genuinely this time. Interesting, he said. You don't scare easily. I'm starting to, she replied. Honest. But controlled. The man nodded slightly. Good. That means you understand the situation. Elena's eyes didn't leave his. Which is? He stepped closer. Slow. Measured. You are the most valuable person in this city right now. Silence. Then. That sounds like a terrible position to be in. It is, he agreed. A pause. Then. But only because of who wants you back. Elena felt it then. That shift. That weight. That truth she had been trying to avoid. Ronin, she said quietly. The man smiled. Yes. Back in Ronin's world. The call came faster than expected. A phone placed on the table. No number. No identification. Luca answered. On speaker. Ronin Veil, the voice said smoothly. I was wondering how long it would take. Ronin stepped forward. Where is she? A soft chuckle. Straight to the point. I like that. Where is she? Ronin repeated. A pause. Then. Safe. For now. Ronin's hand tightened slightly. Say what you want. The voice shifted. Less amused. More serious. Your empire. Silence. Luca's eyes flicked toward Ronin. Watching. Waiting. You built something impressive, Santoro continued. It would be a shame if something happened to it. And you think this is how you take it? Ronin asked. I don't think, Santoro replied. I know. A beat. Then. You have 24 hours. The line went dead. Silence filled the room. Heavy. Sharp. They want everything, Luca said. Yes. And if we don't give it to them? Ronin didn't respond. But that didn't mean freedom. It meant confidence. Their confidence. You're calmer now, Santoro said, stepping into the light. Elena didn't look at him. I realized something. Oh. She finally turned her head slightly. You're not as smart as you think you are. A pause. Then. Santoro smiled. And why is that? Because if you were, she said quietly, you wouldn't have taken me. That got his attention. Fully. Explain. Elena held his gaze. Because even now. Even here. She refused to be small. Because now he's not going to stop, she said. Silence. Not doubt. Not fear. But acknowledgement. Santoro nodded slowly. Yes, he admitted. That is the risk. A beat. Which is why this ends tonight. Outside. Headlights cut through the darkness. One car. No convoy. No backup. Just him. Luca watched from a distance, hidden among shadows, surrounded by men who moved like ghosts. Waiting. Listening. Ready. This is insane, one of them whispered. Luca didn't look at him. No, he said quietly. It's Ronin. The car door opened. Ronin stepped out. Alone. Unarmed. At least. That's what it looked like. Inside. They're here, one of Santoro's men said. Santoro exhaled slowly. Bring him in. The doors opened. Metal groaning. Echoing. Ronin walked in without hesitation. Without fear. Without stopping. And the moment Elena saw him, everything inside her stilled. He came. Not with an army. Not with destruction. But with certainty. Their eyes met. Across the room. Across everything. And in that single moment, there were no words. Just truth. You shouldn't have come, she said quietly. Ronin didn't take his eyes off her. There wasn't another option. Santoro stepped forward. Clapping slowly. Beautiful, he said. Truly. Ronin finally looked at him. This ends now. Santoro smiled. That depends on you. A gesture. And Elena was pulled slightly to her feet. Ronin's gaze darkened. Just slightly. But enough. You said you wanted the Empire, Ronin said. I do. Then take it. Silence. Even Santoro paused. You're serious? Yes. A beat. Then laughter. Loud. Echoing. Unbelieving. You built all of this, Santoro said. And you're willing to walk away, for her? Ronin didn't hesitate. Yes. The word hit harder than any weapon in the room. Because it was real. Elena felt it. That weight. That truth. And it terrified her. You see? Santoro said, gesturing toward him. This is why you matter. But what he didn't understand, what none of them understood, was that Ronin had already made his decision long before he walked into that building. He just needed them to believe he hadn't. Drop your weapons, Santoro said. Ronin didn't move. Now. Slowly. Ronin raised his hands. Empty. From the shadows above. Luca watched. Waiting. Counting. 3. 2. 1. The lights went out. Darkness swallowed the room instantly. Gunfire exploded. Chaos. Shouting. Metal crashing. Bodies moving in panic. Then. The lights flickered back on. Too late. Because the room had already changed. Ronin moved fast. Faster than anyone expected. Straight toward Elena. A man stepped in his path. Gone. Before he even realized it. Another. Down. Everything was precise. Controlled. Deadly. Elena. She moved toward him. Without thinking. Without hesitation. But Santoro. He saw it. And he reacted. Gun raised. Aimed. Time slowed. Ronin saw it. The angle. The distance. The inevitability. And for the first time in years. He didn't think. He felt. He moved. Between her. And the bullet. The shot rang out. Elena's breath caught. But Ronin didn't fall. Because the shot never landed. Santoro's hand jerked. The gun flew from his grip. A second shot. Precise. From above. Luca. Santoro staggered back. Shocked. Furious. You. Ronin didn't let him finish. He closed the distance. Fast. Relentless. And in that moment. There was no hesitation left. No control. No restraint. Just a man. Taking back what was his. Santoro tried to reach for another weapon. Too late. Ronin grabbed him. Pulled him forward. This was your mistake, Ronin said quietly. And then. It ended. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just final. Silence fell. Broken only by distant movement. By men securing the building. By the last echoes of a war already decided. Ronin turned. Elena stood there. Unhurt. Unbroken. Alive. For a moment. Neither of them moved. Because everything that had just happened. Everything that could have been lost. Hung between them. Then. She stepped forward. And he didn't stop her. Her hands reached him first. Then her breath. Then everything else. You came, she whispered. Ronin exhaled slowly. For the first time since this began. I told you I would. And that. Was the truth. But what neither of them knew yet. Was that saving her. Was only the beginning. Because surviving the war was one thing. Living after it. That was something else entirely. And their story. Wasn't over yet. War ends in silence. Not the kind that follows peace. But the kind that lingers after everything that could break, already has. The factory stood quiet behind them. No more gunfire. No more shouting. Just the distant echo of waves crashing against rusted metal, like the world itself was reminding them that some things never stop moving, no matter how much blood is spilled. Elena didn't realize she was shaking until Ronin's hand found hers. Not forceful. Not controlling. Just there. Steady. Grounding. You're safe, he said. The words were simple. But this time. They felt real. She looked at him. Really looked. Not the man people feared. Not the name whispered in dark corners. But the man who had walked into death without hesitation. And come back for her. You gave up everything, she said quietly. Ronin didn't answer immediately. Because what she didn't understand yet. Was that he hadn't lost anything. I gave up what didn't matter, he replied. Behind them, Luca approached. Careful. Respectful. But direct, as always. It's done, he said. Ronin nodded once. And the others? Handled. A pause. Then. And the Empire? Luca added. That question lingered longer than the rest. Because it wasn't just about power. It was about identity. Everything Ronin had been for years came down to that answer. Ronin, Elena said softly. Come here. He stepped inside slowly. Carefully. Like the moment might break if he moved too fast. And then he saw her. Small. Fragile. Perfect. His daughter. Isabella, Elena whispered. The name settled into the air. Soft. Warm. Alive. Ronin didn't speak. Didn't move. Not at first. Because for the first time in his life, he didn't know how to. Elena, he said quietly. She smiled. Tired. But radiant. You're allowed to feel this, she said. And that was all it took. Ronin stepped forward. Carefully took the child into his arms. And something inside him. Something that had been broken for years. Finally healed. I'll protect her, he said. Not as a promise. As a fact. Elena reached for his hand. You don't have to do it alone. He looked at her. Then at Isabella. And for the first time, the man who once ruled through fear understood something far greater. Peace. Years later, the ocean was still there. Unchanged. Endless. But they were different. Elena sat on the sand, Isabella laughing beside her as waves chased her small footsteps. Ronin stood a short distance away. Watching. Always watching. But not out of fear. Not out of control. Out of love. You're doing it again, Elena called out. What? Thinking too much. He walked toward them. Slowly. I'm not thinking, he said. Then what are you doing? Ronin looked at his daughter. At the woman who had changed everything. At the life he never thought he'd have again. Living. And this time. It was true. Because in the end, this wasn't a story about power. Or revenge. Or war. It was about two broken people. Who found something stronger than fear. Something stronger than loss. Something that didn't demand control. But offered meaning. Love. And sometimes, that's the most dangerous thing in the world. But also, the only thing worth fighting for.